So this lesson is all about positive action. But first we're going to look at a UK case study about the pandemic. So on the 31st of December, China alerts the World Health Organization that there's a new virus. Then on the 23rd of January, Wuhan went into lockdown. The Lancet, which is a scientific journal, revealed the acute danger of this virus to human life. Now, Boris Johnson, who's the UK Prime Minister, on the 29th of January, a month later, basically misses the second most important meeting about this virus. Then on the 30th of January, the WHO, the World Health Organization, declares a public health emergency of international concern. The health system in England declares a critical incident on the 31st of January. We were told that the virus could infect 45 million people in the UK if it was left unchallenged on February 12th. The first recorded coronavirus death happened on the 15th of February in Europe. And then on the February 26th, we were told that 500,000 Britons could die. And this is from a government document titled The Worst Case Scenario, and that was the 26th of February. Even after that, the Prime Minister joined 82,000 spectators at a rugby match, essentially, which is a big transmission event, essentially. So, and then 20th of March later, they closed the schools in the UK. Now, in the UK, there's been 12 million cases and over 121,000 deaths. In Ireland, it's been 216,000 cases and 4,137 deaths. And worldwide, it's been 112 million cases and 2.48 million deaths. Now, the point I'm really trying to make here is that actually sometimes leaders in society and the normal Joe Soap, just like us, we see warning signals and we don't pay attention to them. And if we had paid attention to them much, much earlier, this could have much been reduced. So this is where I kind of go into what's happening around the world right now. If you look in the paper, well, some papers like The Guardian who are reporting on this, there is a climate emergency. But we've known about this for a very, very, very long time. So you can see the headlines: global freshwater fish populations at risk of extinction. This is global freshwater fish populations. Fires are spreading to areas that they haven't been to before. We hear just the other day it was published that the climate crisis hitting worst case scenario warns the Environment Agency that this is a threat to humanity itself. Climate change to drive migration from island homes sooner than thought. So like in places like the Maldives, which have a population of 530,000 people, their governments are literally talking to other governments and saying, can you take people when the time comes from our countries into your country, because we won't be able to we won't be able to live on our islands anymore because they'll be underwater. Those are conversations that are actually happening right now, and that population is the same as the population of Cork pretty much in Ireland. Rising temperatures shrink the Arctic Sea, so on and so forth. You get the idea. Like, we're very aware of what's happening about, the climate crisis and loss of nature, but we're still not taking the action that we need to take. And when you hear these headlines, it can cause like a huge amount of anxiety and fear, and actually that's an appropriate response, because this is scary, but actually there's an awful lot we can do about it. But the problem is governments are not acting fast enough. So if you look at this gentleman here called Mike Kudima on Twitter, he publishes a lot of stuff about solutions that we have in place. Like, for example, he talks about how this Central American country managed to double the size of its rainforest in a generation by doing things like paying landowners to conserve their land. He said that Turkey have piloted this way of creating energy by these wind turbines from like literally just buses passing. And they've got solar panels that generate enough electricity in this pilot project to power 20,000 homes. Chinese scientists have invented solar panels that can actually generate power at night through rain droplets. Coca-Cola, he was saying, produces 3 million tons of plastic packaging a year. And they're not changing that because they think customers don't want it. And if we don't buy their bottles or we communicate with them, then they will change. He's saying that China has installed enough solar power to cover a football pitch every hour of every day. There's lots of solutions in place, but we just need to actually start putting them into place. So if you've seen A Life on Our Planet, and I suggest you watch it because it's really, really, really informative. In 83 years, in David Attenborough's life, he's seen the population of the world triple. And we've used huge amounts of resources and generated a huge amount of carbon dioxide in that time. The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has jumped up by 48%. And that's nearly half. And the remaining wilderness has actually almost halved from 66% to, in 2020, 35% of the world has been left wild, which is a very, very, very small amount. The World Wildlife Fund publish a living planet report every once in a while. This is like a health check planet, like when you go to a doctor and they give you a health check. And they say that our planet's wildlife populations have plummeted by 68% in size. Now, if our human population was to decrease by 68%, that's like you're wiping over 5 billion people off the planet. And that's just an average. So like for freshwater organisms, the population has declined by even more, by 84%. So we have a tendency, because of our anxiety and fears, to basically put our heads in the sand. And that means that when we're having conversations with people, we're not having the right conversations. We're not talking about what's happening with the climate. And we're not talking about what's happening with this incredible loss of nature, the sixth mass extinction. And why is that a problem? Well, if we're not talking about it, then government think, well, we're not really bothered by it too much. And they're not actually going to take the actions that we need them to take to actually save our planet. So this is where today's kind of lesson comes in about taking positive action, because we need to talk. And Irish people are very good at talking, but we need to start talking about the right things. When I was probably 12 or 10, in the summer, my parents and I would go for a drive just around the countryside. It might be an hour in the car or maybe 40 minutes. And at the end of that drive, our windscreen was covered with insects, dead insects that collided with the car when we were driving. That doesn't happen anymore. There's just, the insects aren't there. Their populations have declined. I've actually seen this. And if you talk to your parents about this very thing, do you notice, Mum and Dad, that the actual number of insects have actually declined? Can you remember when the windscreen of the car was covered with dead insects after a drive? They'll actually remember that. And we've seen this all over Europe, that this beaker shows you the insects collected in one area in 1994 over a 2-week period, and it's nearly full. And then, over 20 years later, you can see that it's nearly empty. And what we've seen is that pollinating insects, flying insects, have decreased across Europe by over 70%. And that's a signifier that actually there's something wrong here. And all those insects are food for other organisms in the food chain. So they're food for birds or mammals. And that's, a big concern if there's such a massive drop in their populations. So what's happening in the countryside right now that's linked to this? Well, all the hedgerows are being cut. And if they're cut right now in spring, well, they're not going to flower in spring. And if they don't flower in spring, there's essentially going to be no food for our flying insects. And if there's no food for them, then there's no food for the birds that are going to eat those flying insects. And if the hedges don't flower, well, they're not going to produce fruit. So that's another food source gone. And at the same time, we're going to be starting to mow our lawns as the weather gets sunnier. And all the weeds that would have flowered in our lawns and produce food for our pollinators, they're not going to flower. So essentially, we are starving our wildlife. So this is why we've launched a Biodiversity Champion challenge in our school. Because actually, one, we can actually fix this. We can actually create habitat and food for our insects, and we can turn this around. And if we talk to people, our neighbours and our family, we can actually spread this information and get other people doing it too. So what's this challenge about? Well, there's a bronze, silver, gold award, and that means that, like, for bronze, you have to create a 1 by 1 meter nature patch in your garden or community. Silver, a 2 by 2 meter nature patch, or gold, a 3 by 3 meter nature patch. And then there's one award for a Biodiversity Champion, which is a student and their family who go above and beyond to create a space for nature in their community. And it could be really simple. It could be just like, don't mow your lawn, or mow it like every 7 weeks, so that the weeds can flower, like things like dandelions that are superfood for insects. Or plant nectar-rich flowers. There's lots of things you can do. So some of the categories, the awards are certificates and positive points, but for the overall Biodiversity Champion, it's a voucher for €100 and a year family pass to Mount Congreve Gardens and Lafcadio Hearn Japanese Gardens. Now also we'll have prizes every month, so if you submit a picture of what you've been doing, you can be entered into a raffle to get a prize. And then we'll announce the winners at the end of the school year in May. And we'll talk further about that as we progress. So there's lots of things you can do, and it's really fun. Like, this is good for your kind of well-being of yourself and your family too. Like creating nesting habitats, putting up bird feeders, planting trees, being very ambitious, creating a pond, which is something I'm going to do this year. Planting a hedge, and actually you can do it really, really cheaply, and I've got lots of videos to show you how to do that. So the first thing I want you to do today is sign up to the Google Classroom, and this is the code. So pause the video now, take this down and sign up to this challenge. But actually you don't even have to sign up to the challenge, but at least all the information is in that classroom, so you can learn a little bit more about it, with lots of videos, very short, maybe 1 minute clips to show you what to do. So pause the video now. Okay, second thing I want you to do is this is optional. If you're going to sign up to the challenge, there's a link in your Google assignment for today, and you can fill in this form. The third thing I want you to do, there's a link to complete a quiz. So what's your knowledge like? Test yourself. It's a short quiz, go through it and score yourself and see how many questions you got right. The fourth thing and the last thing I want you to do today is to write down in your copy 3 things you've learned from this lesson, and write a sentence stating what action you are going to take and why you're going to take it. So I hope that you will join us and be part of this challenge, because it's really, really important. We actually, like this decline of pollinators by over 70%, we can change that, but we need to work together. And one of the wonderful things about the pandemic, I will say, is there's been a huge amount of collective action across the world, governments and communities working together to bring down the transmission of coronavirus. If we could work in the same way to act on the climate crisis and reduce this loss of nature, it would be absolutely and utterly amazing.